Her wrists were bleeding. The coarse rope bit deep into her skin, cutting past the flesh like a knife slowly turning. She couldn't scream anymore. Her throat was too dry, too sunburned, too broken. Emma Gardner had been tied to the old hitching post since sunrise. Now the sun was dropping low, dragging her shadow across the dust like a ghost that wanted to escape without her. The crack of a bullwhip split the air again. It carved another line across her back, tearing through what little remained of her once white blouse. Blood, both fresh and dried, painted her pale skin in cruel patterns. Her bare feet dangled inches above the ground, toes stretching desperately for earth they couldn't reach. She had once believed she was coming west to start a new life. Now she was just praying for a fast death. "Please, just make it quick," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the Wyoming wind. A shadow stretched across the dirt, growing longer with each heavy footstep. The man called himself Lester Wade. His laughter was worse than the whip, cold, empty, enjoying every moment of her suffering. He circled her like a vulture, running the leather whip through his fingers. "Ain't nobody coming for you, girl," he said, taking a pull from his whiskey bottle. "This here's the devil's land now." But somewhere beyond the fence line, the devil was about to meet his match. Mason Reed dismounted at the edge of the property, his weathered boots landing silently in the dust. The setting sun caught the silver handle of his Colt Single Action Army .45, throwing light across the barrel that had ended more lives than he cared to remember. The revolver rode in a worn leather holster, its ivory grip notched 5 times, one mark for each Confederate officer he'd killed at Gettysburg. He checked the cylinder, 5 rounds, each one seated perfectly. In the right hands, 5 bullets was more than enough. 6 years had passed since the war ended, but Mason still moved like a soldier, eyes constantly scanning, body always ready. At 45, his face was a map of hard years and harder choices, but his eyes remained sharp as a hawk's. The red bandana around his neck was the only color on him. Everything else faded to the browns and grays of a man who lived in dust and shadow. He'd come back to honor Catherine, his wife, dead 1 year today from the fever. Instead, he found something that made his blood run cold. The sign that once proudly displayed Catherine's Ranch hung broken and defiled, with crude words painted beneath it. Devil's Territory. Dried blood stained the wooden post. Mason's hand instinctively tightened on his Bowie knife, the one Catherine had given him before he'd ridden off to fight for the Union in '61. He'd never used it for killing, until today. The scream died in the wind, but Mason heard it anyway. His body tensed as he moved forward, staying low along the fence line. What he saw made his jaw clench so tight he thought his teeth might crack. A woman, young, bloody, hanging from the very hitching post where he'd tied his horse 100 times before. Encircling her, a man with a whip and a smile that belonged in hell. Mason had seen enough death in the war to last 10 lifetimes. He'd watched friends die screaming at Bull Run, seen boys no older than 16 cut down at Antietam, but nothing prepared him for seeing a woman tortured on the land Catherine had loved. He moved without thinking, crossing the distance like a mountain lion, silent, deadly, purpose in every step. His knife found the first rope in one clean slice. The woman gasped as her arm fell free, blood rushing back into dead limbs. "Easy now," Mason whispered, his voice rough as gravel. "You're safe." Her eyes fluttered open, revealing a flash of green beneath the dirt and blood. "No one's safe here," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He'll come back. He always comes back." Mason cut the second rope, catching her weight as she collapsed against him. Her body felt impossibly light, like a bird with broken wings. He eased her to the ground, offering his canteen. She drank desperately, water spilling down her chin and neck. "Can you tell me your name?" Mason asked, his eyes never stopping their scan of the property. "Emma," she managed, clutching the red bandana he draped over her shoulders. "Emma Gardner." "Who did this to you, Emma?" His voice was controlled, but beneath it lay something dark and dangerous. She hesitated, then whispered it. "Lester Wade." Her fingers tightened on Mason's arm. "He said this place was his now? Said the owner was dead, killed in the war. I was fool enough to believe him when he offered me work." Mason's hand moved to his Colt. "Well, he was wrong about that. I'm very much alive." Inside the main house, Mason found destruction. The table Catherine had lovingly built from oak was carved with obscenities. Empty whiskey bottles littered the floor, and worst of all, scratched into the wall with a knife. The words "Devil's Home" stared back at him. Mason moved methodically through each room, cataloging every violation. In the back office, he found papers. Wanted posters from back east. Lester Wade, wanted for murder of 2 lawmen in New York, suspected member of the notorious Dolan gang. The pieces fell into place. The ranch's location near the Overland Trail made it perfect for running contraband to the mining camps in the Black Hills. A schedule tucked between the posters confirmed his suspicions. More gang members arriving tonight, bringing merchandise from a bank job in Cheyenne. This wasn't just about reclaiming his home anymore. This was about stopping something much worse. He returned to Emma, who sat wrapped in a blanket on the porch. Her eyes were clearer now, strength returning to her face. "He's part of something bigger," she said, watching Mason check his weapons. "4 men at least, maybe more coming. They've got new guns. Remingtons, I think. He'd talk when he was drinking about shipments and payoffs." Mason nodded, loading his Winchester 66, the Yellow Boy as soldiers called it. The brass receiver gleamed dully in the fading light. "You know how to use one of these?" he asked, offering the rifle to Emma. She took it, her hand steadier than he'd expected. "My pa taught me before the consumption took him. That's why I came west. Nothing left in Chicago but bad memories." Mason showed her how to work the lever, cycling 16 rounds of 44-40 into position. "Aim for the center," he instructed. "Don't try for fancy shots. Just point and squeeze. Let the rifle do the work." As darkness fell, Mason transformed the ranch into a fortress. He positioned furniture as cover, set traps near the entrances, and placed simple black powder charges at strategic points. Every move was calculated, drawing on years of battlefield experience. "Were you really at Gettysburg?" Emma asked as they fortified the windows. Mason paused. "Lieutenant, 7th Cavalry Regiment. We held the line on Cemetery Ridge." His eyes grew distant. "Lost my best friend there. Confederate sharpshooter would have had me too if Tom hadn't stepped in front." Emma watched him, understanding dawning. "Wade was Confederate, wasn't he? How'd you know?" "Things he said. About bluebellies deserving what they got. About a brother who never came home from Pennsylvania." Mason felt cold realization wash over him. "What was his brother's name?" "Jedediah, I think. Said he was the best shot in Virginia." The name hit Mason like a physical blow. Jedediah Wade, the sniper he'd killed on the 3rd day of Gettysburg, after the man had taken down 6 Union officers. Mason had shot him through the throat at 300 yards. "This isn't just about the ranch," Mason said quietly. "This is about revenge." The horses came just after midnight. Mason heard them while they were still a quarter-mile out. 3 riders moving fast. He positioned himself by the front window. Colt ready, Winchester within reach. "Remember," he whispered to Emma, hidden behind the stone chimney with the rifle. "Wait for my signal." The first rider appeared in the yard. Lester Wade himself, 2 Remington New Model Army revolvers holstered at his hips. He wore all black, his face partially hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. 2 men flanked him, one tall and thin carrying a Spencer repeating rifle, the other stocky with a sawed-off shotgun. "Something ain't right," the tall one said, sniffing the air. "Place is too quiet, Lester." Wade dismounted, drawing one revolver. "Shut up, Jackson. Girl's probably just passed out. Or dead." He laughed, the sound echoing across the yard. "Wouldn't be the first." Mason watched them approach, controlling his breathing the way he'd learned in the war. Wait for the right moment. Make every shot count. Wade kicked open the door, stepping into the darkened house. Come out, little dove," he called. "Lester's back with some friends who'd like to meet you." Mason stepped from the shadows, Colt leveled at Wade's chest. "The owner of this ranch would like to meet you, too." The shock on Wade's face was worth waiting for. His mouth opened, eyes widening as he recognized the man standing before him. "You're supposed to be dead," he hissed. "Disappointed?" Mason asked, his voice ice cold. "Must run in your family. Your brother made the same face when I put a bullet through his neck at Gettysburg." Wade's expression contorted with rage. "You killed Jed." His hand tightened on his revolver. "I've been looking for you for 6 years. Well, you found me." Mason didn't blink, didn't flinch. "Now get off my land." The world exploded in gunfire. Wade's first shot went wide, splintering the wood beside Mason's head. Mason fired back, catching Wade in the shoulder, spinning him around. Outside, the other men scattered for cover, bullets flying through windows and doorways. Mason ducked behind an overturned table as buckshot from the stocky man's shotgun tore through the wall. He fired twice more, one shot catching the man in the chest, dropping him instantly. "Reeves is down," Jackson shouted from outside. "Wade, we need to pull back." But Wade wasn't retreating. Blood streaming from his shoulder, he fired wildly, hatred fueling every shot. "You blue-belly bastard," he screamed. "I'll burn this whole place with you in it." A bullet grazed Mason's leg, sending white-hot pain up his thigh. He rolled behind the chimney, his back pressed against the stone, as Wade advanced. Then came the crack of the Winchester. Emma fired from her position, the bullet striking Wade's hand, sending his revolver spinning across the floor. "Run!" Mason shouted to her as Wade dived for his weapon. But Emma didn't run. Instead, she worked the lever on the Winchester, chambering another round. "This is for what you did to me," she said, and fired again, hitting Wade in the leg. Mason used the distraction to launch himself at Wade, driving his shoulder into the man's chest. They crashed to the floor, fists and elbows flying. Wade was younger, stronger, fueled by hatred and whiskey. He slammed Mason's head against the floorboards, stars exploding behind the older man's eyes. "I'm going to kill you slow," Wade snarled, reaching for his knife. "Just like I did your pretty little wife." The words froze Mason's blood. "What did you say?" Wade grinned, blood in his teeth. "Found her last year, all alone. Fever had her weak. Told her I was a friend of yours." He laughed. "She called your name at the end." Something snapped in Mason. Years of controlled violence, of disciplined killing, gave way to pure rage. His hands found Wade's throat, thumbs pressing into the windpipe. Wade thrashed beneath him, knife slashing wildly, opening a gash across Mason's forearm. Mason didn't feel it, didn't care. All he saw was Catherine's face. All he heard was her voice. The knife plunged into Mason's side, but still he didn't release his grip. Wade's eyes bulged, his face turning purple as Mason's blood dripped onto his chest. A shadow fell across them. Emma stood there, Winchester pointed at Wade's head. "Let him go," she said quietly. Mason stared up at her, not comprehending. "Not like this," she continued. "Not for him. He doesn't deserve to change you." Slowly, Mason's grip loosened. Wade gasped for air, consciousness returning to his eyes. Mason stood, pressing a hand to his bleeding side. Outside, a new sound. Horses approaching, many of them. Mason staggered to the window, riders with badges, led by Sheriff McAllister from Laramie. "Looks like your friend Abel sent word after all," Emma said, keeping the rifle trained on Wade. Mason nodded, the rage slowly draining from him, leaving only pain and exhaustion. Justice comes in its own time. Dawn broke over Catherine's ranch, painting the buildings in gold and crimson. Sheriff McAllister and his deputies had taken Wade and Jackson away in chains, along with the recovered money from the Cheyenne bank robbery. Reeves' body lay covered in the yard, waiting for the undertaker's wagon. Mason sat on the porch steps, freshly bandaged, a cup of coffee warming his hands. Emma stepped out to join him, her own wounds cleaned and dressed. "Sheriff says there's a $500 reward for Wade," she said, sitting beside him. "Offered me a cut for helping capture him." Mason nodded. "You earned it." "I told him I didn't want it." She looked out across the land, to where the sun was climbing over distant mountains. "Told him to use it to rebuild this place instead." Mason turned to her, surprise in his eyes. "If you'll have me as your ranch manager," she continued, "I know cattle. My pa ran 60 head back in Illinois before he got sick." For the first time in what felt like years, Mason smiled. A small thing, rusty with disuse, but real. "Ranch needs a woman's touch again. Catherine would have liked you." They sat in silence, watching the new day spread across land that had seen too much blood and pain. Later, they would repair the sign, replace Devil's Territory with Catherine's Ranch once more. Mason would add a new word beneath it: justice. Emma looked at the bandana she still wore around her shoulders, Mason's red cloth, now stained with both their blood. "Pain leaves scars," she said softly, "but it doesn't get to keep the land." Mason nodded, his hand resting on the Colt at his side. "Justice does. Courage does." As they spoke, dust appeared on the horizon. A stagecoach making its way along the overland trail, civilization pushing ever westward. Mason watched it, knowing that with civilization came new challenges, new dangers. But for the first time since the war, since losing Catherine, he felt something like purpose again. This land, her land, would stand for something good. He glanced at Emma, seeing the same determination in her eyes. Two broken people, finding strength in what remained. In the distance, the stagecoach drew closer, bringing with it whatever tomorrow held. And Mason knew that in this wild frontier, justice didn't always come from courthouses and judges. Sometimes it came from the hands of a man willing to stand and fight for what was his. If you've made it this far, take a moment to leave a comment below. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. And if you want to ride along through more tales of the Old West, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Every story here has darkness, but always ends with a sliver of light. Because that's what the frontier was all about. Finding hope in the harshest places and standing your ground when the devil himself comes calling.